The playoff is set, but did the committee get it right? That's the topic of a lot of conversation right now, and I want to talk about all of that and more. So let's break down this year's college football playoff. First off, asking whether or not the committee got it right or wrong is the wrong question, I think, because there was no right answer. For the most part, this decision was out of the committee's hands, and as someone who has a rooting interest in Florida State, I'm the last person that wants to defend the committee. Trust me. I'm not removing all the blame from them, though. I'm going to get to that in a second. But my point is that the main issue with the playoff system this year is the format. I'm already not a fan of 12 teams, but when you add in automatic bids and automatic buys, it's just ridiculous. But starting at its core, let's talk about the 12 teams thing. Because I've talked, to some people that I think that they believe that the solution is to expand to 16 teams, which I think is crazy because the whole reason we're in this predicament is because we expanded in the first place. And before I get the comments about March Madness and how the playoff system is entertaining, politely miss me with all of that, because college basketball and college football are two very different sports and they don't work the same way. I heard someone say that at work and I was just baffled by the fact that they believe that kind of system that works in basketball would work in college football. Basketball is and always has been a postseason sport, while college football was and always should be a regular season sport. Expanding the playoff field devalues regular season games. There's a reason most people only watch college basketball during March Madness, and that should never be how college football is viewed. But whatever, I'm yelling into the void here because nothing I say or do is going to make the cat go back into the bag. But since we do have the 12-team playoff and there's no real chance of going back, we have to at least look at the format and how to make that format better. Firstly, why should you get an automatic bid for winning your conference championship game? That means a team could lose every single out-of-conference game that they play and still get into the playoffs just because they win their below-average conference. But a team that you lost to that has equal or a better record is held back from the playoffs just because they play in a stronger conference. That's pretty much what we got with Clemson this year. I don't want to sound like I am an SEC homer or anything, but you cannot in good conscience tell me that Clemson deserves a spot over South Carolina when South Carolina beat them in a head-to-head, has the same record, and plays in a much better conference. That makes no sense to me. It's insanity. Imagine if Clemson had lost to App State and Citadel as well. Well, they would still be in the playoffs because they won their conference. In this playoff system, a team can have 5 or more losses and still make the playoffs. They could lose half of their games and make the playoffs. That, to me, is ridiculous, and the fact that we are giving automatic bids to G5 teams is a joke. It's a waste of a spot. What I'm not saying is that Boise State did not deserve a spot in the playoffs. They absolutely did. I'm saying that we should not have guaranteed a G5 spot every year because we don't always have a team in the G5 that is deserving of a spot. And there will be years where the highest-ranked G5 school has several losses and is leagues below the level of competition of their power conference opponents. I think that G5 schools should be allowed to compete for an at-large spot if they're good enough to be in that field, but they should not just automatically get in because I promise you that a lot of non-playoff power conference teams are better than the highest-ranked G5 school at the end of the season most times. And the last issue I have is the way that the seeding works. Maybe that's just this year's problem. Only time can tell, but it seems like teams may be rewarded for losing their conference championship games over winning their conference championship games. For example, Oregon and Penn State. Oregon won the Big Ten, went undefeated, and has the number 1 seed in the playoffs. And what's their reward? Oh, well, they have to play the winner of Ohio State, Tennessee, and then likely Texas afterwards. No biggie, right? So surely Penn State, the team that lost the Big Ten championship game to Oregon, got an even harder route. And what was their punishment for losing? Oh, a game against SMU at home and then a neutral site game against Boise State. Do we not see the problem here? We can sit here and argue how much a bye is worth and whether you would rather play one less game. Would you rather play one team you are slightly favored against or 2 teams that you are a big favorite against? But to me, it doesn't feel right that the number 1 seed in the playoff has the hardest second round than anyone else in the playoffs that got a bye. The number 1 seed has the hardest round. And let's just talk about the teams in the playoffs now. Given the format we have, did the committee make the right decision on who to put in? And I think they did, which honestly surprised me. I know a lot of Alabama fans and maybe some other SEC fans may be upset about Alabama getting left out, but I just do not sympathize with that point. In fact, I don't think Alabama should have even been the team that was considered. I would have been way more willing to hear arguments from Ole Miss and South Carolina fans than Alabama fans. I'm all on board with strength of the schedule if your losses are to quality opponents, but losing to Vanderbilt and getting blown out by Oklahoma, absolutely not. At that point, your argument becomes void in my eyes. And Alabama fans can sit on their high horse and act like they are the better team and would be favored against certain teams in this field, but they were also favored by 22.5 points against Vanderbilt and 14.5 points against Oklahoma. And in the end, it didn't matter. They lost anyways. And the whole best team thing is just an excuse that they used to keep Florida State out last year. If we want to put the 12 best teams in, why not just use the odds market to decide the playoffs? There has to be a reason that we play the games on the field and not on paper. It should always be the most deserving teams, and Alabama did not fit that bill. I will say I was surprised that they didn't put Alabama in because they make them more money, and I have seen them make the wrong decision when Alabama is involved before and putting Alabama in, but surprisingly and thankfully, they put the right team in. So let's talk about the matchups from the bottom to the top of this bracket. Starting out with Clemson at Texas. So Clemson finds their way into the playoffs despite having 3 losses, and their first opponent is the Longhorns. Believe it or not, this is the biggest point spread in the entire first round of the playoffs. And it favors Texas, and it's not really hard to see why. Their strengths match up very well with Clemson's weaknesses. Clemson has not been able to sustain drives. Their star running back, Phil Maffa, is banged up, and they just overall don't seem like a playoff caliber team. They break off some really explosive plays, but they're really dependent on those explosive plays. They have a really inconsistent offense, and they're playing a Texas team that I think is just a way better team overall, but also has the best defense for stopping explosive plays. And also Texas gets this game at home, which is a huge advantage there. I know Texas has been inconsistent on offense as well, and that could definitely be an issue, but they have the edge in almost every position. Their defense is one of the strongest in the country. They have 2 very solid quarterbacks, and Quinn Ewers should be a lot healthier in this game than he was against Georgia. And they're a hard team to pin down because their talent is spread throughout the team, and I think that they will perform better in the red zone this week than they did against Georgia because Clemson does not have the same level of defense that Georgia has. And I think that the bye week will give Texas plenty of time to really prepare for Clemson, and I'm not really expecting a super competitive game here. I know Clemson won't give up, but I expect talent level Texas has to be good enough to outplay and outlast a Clemson team that is void of transfer portal talent that could have really helped them. Moving on now to Tennessee at Ohio State. In this one, I expect to be much more competitive. Probably the first round playoff game that most people have circled, including myself, because both of these teams could be good enough to win it all. These are 2 very, very high-level teams, and I think that this game will be an absolute dogfight. This game is being played at Ohio State. Not that it really helped them much when they were playing against Michigan, but it will bring cold temperatures in a rowdy environment. And it's undeniable that Ohio State's team is talented across the coaching staff and the roster, but for some reason, they have not been able to be the better team on the field in the big games. But will they be able to get it done here? Well, Tennessee will provide a lot of challenges for this Ohio State team that we have yet to see them really overcome. For starters, that Tennessee defensive line against the Ohio State offensive line is going to be a huge talking point that I think favors Tennessee right now. We saw Ohio State try to out-physical Michigan up front in that game and just get stoned all night. Well, Tennessee provides that same level of threat and nasty pass rush that will be able to keep pressure on Will Howard. And Ohio State has the receivers to move the ball on Tennessee's secondary, but it will not be a cakewalk. And that offensive staff will have to work hard for a win. I believe on the other side of the ball, Ohio State's defense is very salty and physical as well. That didn't matter when going up against an offense the caliber of Oregon's, But will it matter here? Well, Tennessee is a really mobile quarterback that has a ton of potential, but still feels like he's putting it all together. He misses some down the field shots sometimes, and he isn't always the best decision maker, but he definitely has the talent. On the ground, Tennessee is a monster in Dylan Sampson. So Ohio State is definitely going to have to respect the run here. And there are a lot of ways that both teams can attack the other. I think that the turnover battle will be a big indication of who wins this game. So who do I think is going to win? Well, with the margins this thin, and I think that there's a lot of vulnerability in this game, I have to go with Tennessee. I actually flipped my pick last second to Tennessee. I'm just not confident that Ohio State will be able to mentally be prepared for this game after that loss to Michigan. I don't know if I can trust Ohio State's strength of schedule to be reflective of who they are. Their quality wins are not all that strong, and I think Tennessee will get it done in Columbus, and I think Ohio State fans are going to have a lot of questions for Ryan Day. Moving on now to SMU at Penn State. And after losing the Big Ten championship game, Penn State is playing SMU at home in round one, like I said. And if you have watched my channel for a while, you would know that I do not think very much of Penn State. They are a team that is capable of beating inferior teams or mediocre teams in their conference, but they never win against comparable or good teams. And that has been their identity for as long as I can remember, and that has been their identity this year as well. Don't get me wrong. I view them as a team with some great players, but I do not view them as a great team. I cannot deny the effectiveness of, a Nick Singleton or Tyler Warren, and Drew Allard, he has his moments, but this team is not a championship team to me. On the flip side, I think SMU is a much better team than what they showcased in the ACC championship game. Early mistakes put them in a big hole early, and they were playing catch-up all game, so they weren't necessarily able to flex their strengths or play the style that they wanted to play. It almost seemed like the moment was too big for them, and the weather was really affecting them, but eventually they settled in. Unfortunately, the moment will be even bigger here, and the weather will be even worse. And it's a true road game in a very, very hostile environment. So that definitely worries me for SMU. Will they be able to handle the moment? That's the big question for me. Will they be able to handle the weather? Also a big question for me. If they handle those circumstances correctly, I think they're the better team. I think they're going to win the game. I know most people may disagree because they watched SMU for the first time in the ACC championship game, and they have lost, both their quality opponents, much like Penn State. I get the sentiment, trust me, but I think SMU is a complete team with a salty defense and an explosive offense that is supported by a solid ground game. And I love the coaching staff there. I think they're incredible. I think SMU is a scary team, but they're also new to this big stage, at least in the modern era. It is impossible to know if they will be mentally prepared for, or even if I think they are physically prepared for this game. I know that there's a lot to overcome, but I do think they're going to be able to do it. I think SMU can and will win this game and shock a lot of people. I know that isn't a safe prediction, but it's the one I'm going with. But my big issue, like I said, is the weather. That's the one thing I'm really concerned about, and that could really turn this game on its head. But we'll have to wait and see if that's as big of a factor as a lot of people are saying it could be. Next, I have Indiana at Notre Dame. It's actually the last game, but it is actually the first game that's going to be played this week. But hot takes don't end here because I'm picking the underdog in this one too. This is an in-state playoff game that I am really, really excited for. We have not seen Notre Dame play a quality opponent since week one. And obviously, they had that embarrassing loss to NIU. In all fairness, they have played some mid-level teams that performed really, really well, much like we have seen from Clemson. But I'm hesitant in their ability to compete against higher-level opponents. And contrary to popular belief, I think that's what Indiana is. Their schedule has been similarly light, but the margin of victory in their wins is quite impressive. And I have supreme confidence in their coaching staff. I think that this team has played excellent on both sides of the ball. I have two major questions for this game, though. Who is going to win in the trenches, and can Indiana make Notre Dame throw the ball? I think that Notre Dame believes that they are the more physical team, and I think they will try to physically dominate Indiana despite Indiana profiling as one of the top teams in the trenches. I do not think Notre Dame will be able to lean on Indiana like they want to, though, because I don't think Indiana will allow them to. And what I mean by that is that I think Indiana will be able to score effectively on offense to make Notre Dame play keep up and not play the style of ball that they want to play. And if that happens, Notre Dame is definitely in trouble because I do not trust that offense to throw the ball. But if Notre Dame's defense can do what Ohio State was able to do in pressuring Curtis Rourke and giving him no time to really get to work, then I think Notre Dame will run away with this game. It all goes back to the trenches. If Indiana's offensive line is as good as I think they are, I think Rourke will have time to make the necessary big plays. But another question is whether the weather plays a factor in this game. This is another really cold game in South Bend that could really hurt the passing game, and I do not expect Indiana to be able to run the ball super well, so the cold could be a huge factor in limiting Indiana's offense, allowing Notre Dame to really rely on their game plan of running the ball and leaning on Indiana. I do not think Notre Dame is the same caliber of team Ohio State is, though, so I don't think that this game will be quite as lopsided, and I think that somehow, Indiana is going to find a way to get it done. I know that Notre Dame is the favorite here, but they are too one-dimensional, and I think that they will need to throw the ball to win this game, and I just do not trust them to do that very well. So that's all I have for you guys this week. We'll see how the playoff games go. I'm really, really excited for them. It's the first, year of the 12-team playoffs, and as much as I'm not a huge fan of them, I am really excited to see how they turn out. So yeah. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please like, comment, subscribe, and make sure you follow me on the socials. That's A_rock321. Yeah, peace.